Asian Power recently caught up with Tony Segadelli of OWL Energy to talk about the issues facing the Philippine power industry.
One of the challenges is that there's only a few players within the market, and some of them have quite a bit of control, including some who have control of distribution as well as generation. Another issue is that there's, because it's a pull market, foreign companies are more concerned about moving into the market than they are about moving into other countries in ASEAN where there's government support. Having said that, there are a lot of local players that can build power plants, and there's new companies trying to move in. There's a very fast-growing economy in the Philippines. The Department of Energy is suggesting that there will be only 4 to 5% electricity growth for the foreseeable future. However, the GDP growth is expected to be between 6 and 7% for the next few years. For countries that are very developed, such as the UK and the US, GDP growth and electricity growth tend to be about the same percentage. For countries that are lesser developed, such as countries in ASEAN, the growth rate tends to be 1.5 times or even 2 times. So if you have a 6% growth rate for GDP, you would expect a 9 to 10% growth rate. So there seems to be a mismatch from what the Department of Energy is saying, which dampens the amount of interest in the power sector compared to what is probably actually going to happen. OWL has expertise across the sector in the Philippines. That includes coal, gas, biomass, wind, hydro, transmission and distribution, pretty much every technology that there is in the Philippines. We have the expertise. In addition to that, we have worked in the Philippines on various projects for 17 years, so we understand the market very well. As part of that, we actually have some of the people who worked with myself and other members of the team contacting us looking for employment, so we have a lot of embedded strength within the country. We are talking to developers on a wide range of technologies. One is related to wind. Another developer is looking at waste to energy. Other developers are looking at biomass projects, including the one that you put me in touch with. So we are looking at projects from the very northern part of Luzon through the Visayas into the very southern part of Mindanao on a range of technologies.
Could you tell us more about the past projects you've done in the Philippines? Is there
Not on renewable energy.
Okay.
The projects we've done in the Philippines have been predominantly coal and a small amount of CCGT. The projects that we're working on will be a benefit to the Philippines in a number of ways. These include that the cost of generation will be decreased. Renewable energy, particularly wind and biomass, can be much cheaper than the embedded generation. When you go to the island in particular, for example, Mindoro, we're talking to a developer down there. They are very close to closing all their deals with the government for developing a wind project. What will happen if that project is built is that they will displace diesel generation and therefore reduce the cost of generation for the local community. This is obviously in addition to the benefits that there are to the environment of displacing fossil fuel with renewable energy, and the benefits to the community that are brought by biomass projects that we're working on. The lower portion of that 6 to 10 is for biomass. That's the lowest tariff rate. However, the rates that are set are generally higher than in other countries within ASEAN. And just because biomass is a lower tariff, it doesn't mean that the returns to the developers are necessarily lower. It just means that the cost of generating electricity is lower. So that has been a cost share between the government taking a lower tariff and the developer still making a good profit. That's one part of it. Another part of it is that the feed-in tariff only relates to the main grid in the Philippines. If you go to the smaller islands such as Mindoro or any of the other islands which are not connected to the main grid, they don't have a feed-in tariff. They have a SPUG, which means that you contract directly with the local government, and then you negotiate based on reducing the cost of electricity. And when you're comparing against generating from diesel, even though the government subsidises diesel, it's still a win-win for both the developer and the local community, and you get a higher rate by doing that. One strong suggestion I would have that I personally can attest to is that it is extremely difficult to set a company up in the Philippines. The amount of red tape and bureaucracy is something I've never seen, and I have companies in various parts of the region. That's one area where the government can definitely help, to have a one-stop shop. Another area would be to have renewable energy in a way where you don't have to have 60% local investment, where you can have 100% foreign investment, just as you do with the coal plants or with the CCGT plants.
Okay, another addition for the suggestion, aside from the two that you have thought of?
Oh, yeah, of course. And the other suggestion would be to actually finalise and issue the implementing rules and regulations. The feed-in tariff as it is a good process. The SPUG process is a good process. The underlying fundamentals are strong. There's, in terms of wind, there's extremely high amounts of wind in the country. In terms of biomass, it's an agrarian society, so there's a lot of agricultural waste that can be utilised. It's a seismically active country, so there's a lot of geothermal, solar. There's a lot of sunshine here. The problem is there's not necessarily a lot of excess space, so it may be more difficult, but rooftop may be an option within the major cities. But the underlying principles are there, it just needs finalising. The oversubscription in solar is an indication that the solar prices have come down dramatically, and they have. When I first started working on solar, which would have been 2006, the price was about $5 a watt. The price now is under $2 a watt. So although the tariff was set for solar much lower than the investors wanted, it's still very economical from their perspective. In terms of wind, it's simply the fact that there is just such a huge resource of wind here. So that's not necessarily such an issue. The biggest problem that solar is going to have is the lack of land. So although the projects have been promoted, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will actually ever be implemented. Thailand is a prime example of contracting for as much solar as you can possibly get, and then finding that you only get 25 to 35% of what's actually contracted.